I'm not interested in having a political discussion or debate about whether we should bomb Syria or not here, but I think we do need to bring this issue up, considering we're reading Moshe Koff, who is a Syrian American writer who is deeply concerned with these issues and has written a great deal about and spoken about what's happening in Syria, the revolution, the civil war, and the possible U.S. strikes. And so I think the question that I'm leaning toward and I've struggled with what to ask is what role should poetry play and writing play and fiction play when we're dealing with these issues, very real issues that are happening right now? What is the role of the poet or the writer and the work that they do? And as readers, what is it? What do we take from that in these moments? So I wanted to take a look at a couple of quotations from Moshe Koff that kind of deal with this issue, and then we're going to look at some of her poetry. But she says, I need for people who are against the strikes in Syria to understand that there are valid reasons and invalid reasons to be against the strikes. And this is someone, Moshe Koff, who is against the U.S. strikes and the idea of U.S. strikes. But she's suggesting here that there's an invalid reason to be against them as well as valid reasons. And I think that's important. After watching the presidential speech, after watching the debate surrounding it over the past few days, it really, so many of the arguments are just truly off-putting, and so she nicely says invalid. And so she continues by saying, wringing your hands and screaming Al Qaeda or Iraq is not a valid reason. You need to get to know Syria and not deny the legitimate struggle of the Syrian people. And once again, she is against the airstrikes or the missile strikes or whatever we're proposing, but she is saying there's wrong reasons. And so I want to go into another quotation from her from another article. She says, let no one deny the horrific massacres of Syrian civilians by the Assad government, no matter what position one has on the imminent U.S. strikes on Syria. Yes, there is a part of me which responds to news of possible strikes with smash the butcher of Syria. But the U.S. is not proposing strikes because it's crying its eyes out over Syrian suffering, or out of goodwill toward the legitimate uprising for which millions of Syrians have been risking their lives and suffering agonies. And so I want to take that seriously and look at some of her poetry and her making the point that we don't seem to be, our concern, and even the stated concerns, are very little about the suffering of the people in Syria. And she points out the reason she's against these bombings is because she feels it will cause more suffering. And so what I want to do is take a look at just a few of her lines of her poetry. And this hit me hard last year when I was teaching her, because when all these places were in the news, in her poem, The Cherries, she's going through all these regions, all these cities, and all these ethnic groups that live in Syria. And I just want to read some of it. And just the tone of the poem is this child, and this is her, who is Syrian American, kind of who hasn't had much experience in Syria and grew up in the U.S., but is kind of reflecting on Syria and has this childish wish of returning and being welcomed into this place. And so she writes, and she's talking about the different groups who would welcome her. Um, I am sure Damascus would puff on a narghili and laugh a deep laugh like a granduncle. Aleppo would croon for me like a handsome blue-eyed muezzin. Hama would frown and act stern, but with a secret kindness on its brow. Homs would set oval platters before me of stuffed eggplant spilling over with almonds. And Latakia would take me to the beach and skip with me and buy me big bright plastic balls. And so even though this is this childish representation of what she imagines of Syria, it is showing this understanding and this excitement of the various cities in Syria and the various cultural things that she's associating with them, the foods, the religion, in these very positive ways. And you see these cities in the news constantly, and um, you know, it's people are dying, lots of people, and I don't want us to go into an incredibly sappy discussion here, but her call in that article of, all these conversations that we have, we don't seem to care about the people involved. And so I would make the argument that, either way, if we bomb Syria, people are going to die. And if we don't bomb Syria, people are going to die. And so if you can think of ways to talk about, what does poetry have to say about this or other world very immediate issues?